Sega today is a lot more cautious in what games that they're going to develop internally and really put a lot of money behind. And I mean, this isn't to be surprised. I mean, Sega said this like 10 years ago that they were going to focus on several of like their franchise IPs and focus on it. That's really what they've been doing. You see with the Yakuza games, and that's so big now. But yeah,
I will say I think they did a great job in terms of like if we're looking at like their entire history, and then we're analyzing the last 6 or 7 years. I think they did a tremendous job making themselves more of a well-known and popular publisher than like around between like 2005 and 10. I think now this era is much better than that era, just because of the things you mentioned with Yakuza, and then all these studios that they've acquired that are also releasing awesome games like the 2 Point series. They've licensed out their IPs, then made games like Streets of Rage 4. They remastered Shenmue. They allowed Shenmue 3 to come out. We talked about Virtua Fighter already. And their real-time strategy games and all that stuff. I think they've done a great job at making a mark and actually being viable for another 10, 20 years. I think that they're pretty well off right now. So
I think there's a lot of, especially old school fans, like some of the people like us, like who grew up with Sega, where we kind of do miss some of the slightly more wackier games that they used to make, the ones that are sort of bright and colourful, because a lot of their games aren't so much anymore these days. But you're right, they are in a very good position at the moment. The games they are making are very good, very solid. They have their occasional misses, but generally they seem to be catering for specific audiences now, whereas before I feel like it's just more like a random stuff. Some of the time it just felt quite random, like Knights and stuff. Like that was so bizarre back in the day, even that it's like, who the hell would play this? But people loved it. But it's sort of shown with some of their more recent games that they pushed out, where they did try to go a bit out there. Those games weren't successful these days, whereas the games they're doing now, very focused. They've got their little niche markets they've carved out, and they're actually doing very well with them. That makes sense.
I mean, we've also got hardware, like the first official hardware from Sega in a number of years with the the Genesis release. So hopefully we'll get some more of those hardware coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean,
the minis.
Hopefully we'll have a Dreamcast Mini one day. That's I think that's what everyone wants. But if that will happen,
Saturn Mini is the one I truly want. I want the Saturn Mini.
If they could do a Saturn Mini with Panzer Dragoon Saga.
There's just so many games in the library that have been like exclusive to that console that I think would be great if we had the opportunity to play it, on a regular TV that doesn't require 50 peripherals to plug in to work.
You have to buy a battery from Mars to.
Oh God, yeah,
to get it to run on channel 2 or HDMI 3 or whatever. But yeah, I think in terms of, I think a lot of people kind of missed that structure of there were 2 or 3 gaming companies and they were all competing, and then they had their set of exclusive games and their strategies and all that kind of stuff. But that's just not really the world that we live in now. Like there's so many other competitors, and like the video game market has expanded and exploded in the past 10 or 15 years. I mean, like it is like a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's so many niche markets and developers and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people in their minds thought of like these big 3 gaming companies, but now there's like hundreds of people who are competing. And other people that aren't normal video game companies like Amazon or Google and Apple, they're all, technically part of that video game market as well. They have their own streaming services and devices, and it's a whole new world in 2021. Yeah. But I do think Sega's in a good position right now and doing what they're doing best, which is making their games. But again, like we would like for them to take advantage of some of the properties that haven't been used in a while. I think that's something that they're currently working on, and you can't expect them to release them all at once. And I think there's definitely talks and plans.
I think kind of adding on to what you're saying, one of the cool and you're seeing more of this, is them working with smaller third-party developers, and maybe it started with Sonic Mania, but look what happened with Streets of Rage, and we're going to hopefully continue to get more of these type of deals. I would love to see that. I think that's a really interesting change that Sega has done, and that gives them, I think, a better way to approach their back catalog of IPs, because I don't know if they internally, if they have studios set up to be able to just take on these kind of projects. I don't think they have anyone ready to go to do that. So they're working with these smaller companies where they can outsource a lot of that stuff and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And the results have been great. They really have up to this point. I think I know Panzer Dragoon, the first one had some a little bit of some issues there, but I think that ironed them out over the
they released an update which sort of
patches and stuff.
Yeah. But
I just think quality-wise, these releases, even though they're not first-party Sega games, it seems like quality-wise they're good and it seems to be selling pretty well. I hope to see them continue that.
Yeah, and it seems like, as you say, it's quite a good strategy because it seems like, because Sega's not technically publishing or developing these games themselves, they've sort of got their name to it because they own the IP, but it's not on their time or their schedule, because like big publishing houses, they have release schedules and stuff. If a game's not released within a certain time window, they sort of have to push the developers to try and do it, whereas these smaller studios seem to have that little bit more freedom and stuff. So they've got passionate people behind it who want to make the best games. So they do seem to put that extra effort and a little bit more time into it, perhaps. Or they can dedicate more of their time, focus more of their time to do this. And that's why they're coming up with really, like the Wonder Boy, like Dragon's Trap. It was phenomenal. I thought it was such a good game, like such a good remaster of the game. And all that stuff. And Streets of Rage 4 I think was fantastic. So
the new Asha is a fantastic game too.
Yes, yeah. I haven't played that yet. Is it actually out now? I feel like I've missed the. Yeah. I missed the launch day then. Screw it. Damn it. But yeah, no, I
got to review up, baby.
I missed that as well. Sorry, I must have been working too busy. I've been busy with work lately. It's been crazy, but
you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, I need to get on that and download it because that's the game I really want to play. But yeah, it seems to be working out for Sega in that way, and that was respect.
Well, I think basically if you have a studio that has the ability to make a game great, I don't need the name Sega stamped on it. If you can make a great Streets of Rage game, which they did, they made a great Streets of Rage sequel, and they're releasing the DLC and the new characters and whatnot, and people look like they're positive about like the new content that they release, even if like maybe Mr. X isn't really necessarily original. Maybe they were expecting a different villain or whatever. But I like I said, I think if they have the ability to send it out to another developer that can make it good, then let it be. Like and if they do a good job, then that's the strategy they should go with, because it doesn't have to be Sega, necessarily to make a good Streets of Rage 4 game, as it has been, proven. So yeah, if they have the ability to do that for other IPs, do it. I think that's a good strategy if they know how to handle that specific IP.
Yeah, I want to ask you guys something like 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. But let's start 20 years ago. If they would have asked you then, well, in 20 years, do you think Sega's still going to be around making video games? What would you have said? So this would have been, if we were 20 years ago, this would have been early 2000s. This would have been when
Dreamcast failed.
Yeah, this would have been right around the time where, like, we're right after. I have to go back and look. So what do you think the future of Sega, if someone would have asked you then, like in 20 years, we're right on the cusp of Sega, discontinuing the Dreamcast. Where do you think they would be in 20 years? What do you think you guys would? I know that's kind of a weird question because we know the answer, but how would you put yourself back then? Like, how would you foresee them going? Because I know my answer. I completely distinctly remember what I thought was going to happen. I wrote about it in the forums, on the Sega forums back.
Oh yeah, God, I remember you writing that. I can't remember what you wrote though. Damn. And Marcy,
I think they would just sell off the Sonic IP or something. Like if they were just going to sell off the company, maybe Nintendo or another, developer or publisher would take their intellectual property and make the games for them. But I don't know. I think like around that time, like I wasn't thinking about it too much. But I guess if I was like with my current self in 2001, I think it would be uncertainty. I mean, like I guess they would just keep making the games that are bringing them some kind of money, which was Sonic at the time. And I know there were those ongoing conversations with them and Microsoft, and they partnered together on the Dreamcast with the online stuff, and then they created the Xbox. So I don't know. And there's still ongoing rumors of Microsoft purchasing Sega.
That would be the longest flirtation ever.
20 years later, they finally buy them.
Yeah, I mean, we really thought that was going to happen after the Dreamcast.
See, this is that's what my answer was going to be. Like, thinking back to where I was at then and stuff, and what I'd read about, I genuinely thought, I think at the time, that Sega and Microsoft were going to work on an Xbox together or something. Like the next thing was going to be a Sega Microsoft team, almost like Sega said that we're not going to make any consoles on our own, but then Microsoft were going to go, hey, help us make the next one, because Microsoft was sort of, I guess with the original Xbox, they didn't struggle as such. It just didn't get as much traction as like, the PS2 or like some of the other consoles and stuff. But it seemed like, Microsoft needed that help of like a solid, game developer, publisher, like who've got a massive foothold around the world. So I genuinely, hand on heart, I thought Microsoft and Sega were going to partner. I didn't think Microsoft were going to buy them out necessarily, but they were going to partner on some stuff, and it's going to be awesome. They were going to blow the shit up out with, like, they're going to blow Sony out of the water and stuff. But didn't really happen. Yeah.
Well, they did collaborate on some stuff.
So. Oh, they did collaborate, but it's not like they didn't make a console together, sadly. But yeah. Hey H2O, thanks for joining. Yo. Yeah.
I do want to say my piece real quick. If you don't mind.
Go for it. Yeah.
Back then, I remember there was a very significant segment of the Sega community who believed that Sega was going to come back to the console business back then. And I was part of that group. I thought that Sega was going to go away and become a third party for a few years, build up some money, make some cool games, put them on other systems. The Sonic games are going to sell millions and millions. All these other games, it's going to be amazing. And then once they get some money back and they got their finances in order, they're going to come back out with the Dreamcast 2 or whatever it's going to be. I really thought that was going to happen. And man, I have to say that would have been the worst thing ever for Sega, because they're too small of a company to compete against Sony and Microsoft. Like, Nintendo struggles to do it, and it's only because they have fucking like magic elves living in their vaults that do all this work engineering for them for these awesome systems that they make. But there's just no way a company the size of Sega would ever be able to compete against these mega corporations. And so it was just always going to be this struggle that they would have. And I think making the move to third party was absolutely the right decision. And it was one of my most angry days of my life, and as far as covering games and everything else goes, when they did make that decision. I was so pissed. I went and traded my Dreamcast at GameStop in that fucking day and just got credit to buy PS2 games. I was so mad. And I really regret that. That was so stupid.
I was so mad.
I think I had enough to buy like one game or something. God, I never get credit. But I thought they were going to come back, and obviously they didn't. But I'm really happy they're here, and I think, man, I would never have believed, a few years ago that they would be in as good of and maybe as healthy of a position as they're in. I know overall, Sega Sammy has been still restructuring and getting rid of some pieces of their operations and what they own and things like that. But if we're just focusing in on Sega games and that part of Sega, I think they're knocking out of the park and doing some really good stuff.
Hello folks, Graham from Megavisions here. What you just saw is a clip from the latest episode of the Megavisions show. Be sure to check out the full video here. And we do also have an audio version of the show available on our website, megavisionsmag.com. Be sure to like and subscribe and check out more of our videos. Cheers everyone.